Okay, let's
Do
do
it.
it. All right, I will introduce Francine Monaco. She will go first. Her subject of her talk is You Are Here. So we thought that was a very appropriate way to start the evening. Francine Monaco and I met when I was an intern at Chico Kala Architects over 30 years ago. Shortly after graduating from Cooper Union and getting onto other jobs, Francine, that was me, by the way, sorry. Francine went off to open her own firm with her partner, Carl D'Aquino. Her firm of Monaco D'Aquino focuses on mostly residential architecture and fine custom interiors, but she's also been involved in commercial work and institutional work, most notably the expansion of the Guggenheim Museum, and many more other fun projects, which we hope she'll allude to in her talk, because as we know, architecture and life are intertwined. We breathe architecture, we live architecture, and we raise families and get married and do all kinds of things in parallel. But Francine also teaches at Pratt. She teaches the graduate program interior design studio. So Francine, you can take it away from here.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here, but very kind of slightly nervous about this talk. I'm just going to talk. So I got no visual aids other than my hopefully expressive face. But I really wanted to first thank I would say, founding partners of the MWA, because it's a really fantastic forum that you've created, and it is, of course, needed. And it's very rare, I think, often to find places that are like safe places for conversation, that are open. And these types of places allow you to hear voices that are often quiet. And it's a reminder that we're not alone, right? Because here we are together. You're all here. You are here. And it reminds us or gives us insight into the various possibilities of what our practices can offer, rather than just seeing what's the most celebrated and the most popular direction. And it is a reminder of all those of us and adjacent and before and after that create the groundwork that we build on, the foundation that we build our practices upon. And we know, I mean, that history is built on our individual stories. So I was really, kind of excited by the idea that this is about mentorships, and it's about, what do we call them, role models. And I was trying to figure out like what to talk about, right? My two colleagues came up with great titles, and I was like, okay, what am I going to talk about? Am I just going to talk about myself? And then I was like, well, that's not good enough. Why does anybody want to hear my story? What is that even? What's the point of it? And then, so then you go through all this, mind games of like, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about that. And you're like, just kind of wiping them off the whiteboard, like they're all useless. And so then you get back to the place where I am, which is talking about myself. So let's see how this goes. The first thing I wanted to do was just kind of give you a couple of prompts. The title, You Are Here, is that we all have stories. We all have stories that are important. And I think the one thing that being asked to do this made me start to think about my own story differently. That we kind of take this path in life and we move through various steps and make various decisions. And we kind of actually forget about them sometimes. We forget really how we made those decisions to get where we are. And so that's one thing. You are here and you have a story as well. And there is a practice that certainly I've noticed at Pratt, and I've noticed at other academic events that I've gone to, where institutions have started doing something called, what Pratt calls it is a living land acknowledgement. And I think that's a fairly common or shared title, where they actually acknowledge the predecessors or the preceding occupants of the land that Pratt occupies. And they acknowledge the Indian population that was the homeland that Pratt built its industry upon. And I thought, well, that's interesting that we've started doing that, because then we're actually starting to acknowledge those stories that we don't get to hear very often, those quiet ones, because they're lost or they're erased. And then the last piece is that we all have different voices. So as you hear all of our stories, just remember that all of our voices are different, and we can even take a very similar path, but we still have a different voice. And it's kind of like, I like the metaphor of the walk on the beach, right? We've all hopefully taken a walk on a beach, and I have, one friend to walk on the beach, and she only picks up these absolutely beautiful translucent orange shells. And there's another friend that walks on the beach, and she only picks up absolutely white stones. They have to be all white. And then another person saves sand from every beach she's ever gone to. But we all walk the same beach, but we see it differently, and we hold memories differently. So again, as you hear my story, hopefully these 3 prompts kind of allow you to think about your own story in a way that maybe gives it a little weight, or a little bit more weight than you might actually consider it having. And as Nick mentioned in my bio, I'm here as the founding partner of a interdisciplinary design studio that's titled Francine Monaco. I'm second, actually, not first. So thank you, though, for giving me the first position, Nick. So we've had our practice for 25 years, and I've been teaching at Pratt Institute in the interior design department for 20 years. And as right there, I had no idea, that is not something that I ever thought I would ever contemplated, that I would have my own practice and that I'd be a professor at an art institute. When I was a child, I wanted to be an architect. I don't remember how young it was, but it was something around the age of 9, I decided I'm going to be an architect. I had no idea what it meant. All I knew was that you got to, a drawing board, and that time it was a T-square and a pencil, and you got to draw all these great things, with a triangle. And that was as much as I understood of architecture, other than the fact that my father was an engineer, and he was as the engineer at a VA hospital, he would often hire architects, but he was still an engineer, and had an opinion of architects that was maybe different than we have of ourselves. But he was a man who understood and really saw beauty in the practice and beauty in the practical side of our practice. So my kind of early growth and familiarity with architecture was kind of built upon that practical sense. And there's a story of my childhood where he and I took it upon ourselves to enter a bridge competition. And this was a competition that was held at a lot of schools, but it was usually like a class and a teacher, and like 10 students would all team together to enter this bridge competition. But he and I decided we were going to do this, and it involved designing a bridge, a model of a bridge, but you had to design a bridge that would be to withstand the most weight relative to its own weight. So the lighter you made it and the more weight it could resist was the way you kind of won the competition. So we spent, months thinking about what's the best, like most efficient bridge design, and as an engineer, he, understood that. And we were always thinking like the suspension bridge is the lightest, most, delicate system. So we figured out how we could make a suspension bridge by bending the balsa wood and how thick it could be or how thin it could be. We made these beautiful little cables out of nylon wires and attached them top and bottom. It was wonderfully elegant little bridge that we were so proud of, until we get to the competition. And there was one little piece of information that seemed to have been missing from our interpretation, is that they weight the bridge from the top. which obviously, if we had maybe designed an upside down suspension bridge, we might have been successful. But when you weight a suspension bridge from the top, it collapses instantaneously. But the process of making this bridge was all about patience. It was all about care. It was all about the process. And that was kind of my appreciation for those aspects of this practice started right there when we made this model together. And from there, when I decided to go to architecture school, and my interest in it hadn't faded by the collapse of my bridge, I went to University of Cincinnati for architecture school. And the program there is a co-op program. I think it still is, at least, and which allows the curriculum to have this dialogue between practice and poetics. And when you're on campus, you're focused on the creative exploration and academics and history. And when the alternate quarters, you go off and work as an intern in an office. And so you get the familiarity of the practice. And their curriculum is also rooted in, or it was rooted in the Bauhaus. So within the School of Architecture building, within the design, architecture, and art building, there was also industrial design, there was communications, graphic design, interior design, and they were all nested in the same building in a very vibrant, dynamic, interdisciplinary shared place. And so that added another layer of my kind of varied understanding of the creative practice, that all these other disciplines had, had a lot of value as well. It wasn't just architecture that was the goal. And that balance of education and work and the multidisciplinary environment really created a educational experience that was, I think, the best I could have imagined it to be, because it opened my mind up to all the creative disciplines. It opened my mind up to the possibilities. It opened my mind up to the possibility of even architecture as a practice, rather than basically coming from the naive place that I started from. So when I graduated and returned to New York, as all good New Yorkers do, I was introduced to a colleague of a professor of mine who was just starting a design build firm. I'm like, okay, well, perfect, right? Design and build, okay, fantastic. And he was a Princeton grad. So that gave him, in my mind, this kind of design cred. And he was partnering with a developer, a small office. And it started an understanding for me of the dialogue between the construct and the concept, and how we have to understand how things come together, and that finesse of how things come together, and the appreciation for those craftspeople who put things together, because our paper is still paper. It is not the three-dimensional world that we are aspiring to create. So the insight into just, appreciating the trade was what that first step in my career gave me. And from there, I went to a firm that Anik is also an alumni of, Chikunyani, where their interest in the detail and their interest in, the execution of not only exquisite documents, but exquisite architecture was a new lens to see the practice through. The work was predominantly, actually at that time, it was only residential architecture. So it was an introduction into a high-end residential world that I didn't grow up in. I didn't know really existed, in a sense. It's not something that's really part of academics, right? The exercises in academia are always institutional or governmental or somehow societal on a bigger picture, right? So the high-end residential world and its richness and diversity and specificity was something that I hadn't been familiar with. And of course, given where my career had went, was something I was really intrigued by. But I took a short stint in there in between, and was offered an opportunity to go work at the Guggenheim when they were doing their renovation, restoration, and addition, and tag into that also the Soho Guggenheim as well, which was like a entree into a world, again, that was just amazingly and exquisite. It was an opportunity to literally live in a Frank Lloyd Wright building during the day. Our office was inside the Frank Lloyd Wright Uptown building, right? And we got to wander the ramp endlessly. When construction ended at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the building was ours. During construction, they had erected a scaffolding in the middle of the rotunda that went to within 5 feet of the skylight. So at the end of their day, we get to run up the ramp, climb the scaffolding, and literally lay on top of the scaffolding within an arm's reach of a skylight designed by, Frank Lloyd Wright, which was kind of an awesome way of becoming intimate with a building, and one that is an artifact that is well respected and a landmark. And each of these steps, going from a referral from a professor to a design build office, and then from a referral from a colleague to a small architectural practice into a high-end residential world, and then a referral from another colleague to the position at the Guggenheim. These were steps that it's not like you plan this. I never said, this is exactly the path I want to take. These are opportunities that are presented that, as long as you are open, you can see that they're there. Right? Which is the hard part, because somehow we often think that there's a right way and think that there is a way. And we're often looking at examples of people that had succeeded and feel that that's the only way. But really the idea is to find your way, right? Which doesn't require a right or a wrong. So from there, or while I was actually still there at the Guggenheim, one of my prior employer at Cicognani Cavolo reached out and said, we have a client that has a small project. Do you want to do a freelance job? I said, sure, that'd be great. So I'm working at the Guggenheim and doing a freelance project at night, and which is, fun, but a lot of work. And even at that moment, when I took on this freelance project, I didn't think, oh, great, my window of opportunity to start my own office. And I thought, oh, some extra money, but what happened is, that project requires you to find a place to do the project. And if you don't want to work from home, you find a desk that you rent in someone's office. I rented a desk in someone's office who happened to be Carl D'Aquino, who ended up becoming my future partner. And Carl was working, doing predominantly decorative and interior design work. He studied architecture, but decided that at some point in his path that he wanted to focus on the decorative. So we would, in the evenings chat about the project that I'm working on and the decorator that's messing things up because they're doing something that just is doesn't fit the architecture at all. And then he'd talk about the architect that doesn't know how to design a room that fits a bed, it's just terrible. And we start thinking about when did this happen? And it wasn't a unique conversation just between the two of us. It's when did architecture lose the interior and it get pushed to another discipline rather than, or can't even say when architecture lost interiors, but when did interiors lose architecture too? Why did they get a divorce? And we thought, okay, well, we're going to create a collaboration that tries to bring these back together again. And at the time, it was a unique conversation. It wasn't one that has now become very familiar, that there are offices that do interiors and architecture together under the same umbrella. But at the time, we were beginning to break those boundaries and start to bring them back, and really start to remind people that, whether we like them or not, Frank Lloyd Wright did the interiors, right? Whether we like them or not, McKim, Mead and White did their interiors, whether, the interior was a part of all Roman architecture, right? We can keep going back in time. It's an interior there. So why are we fighting it? And so that courtship, as we like to call it in the beginning days, grew into the partnership that we have and into the studio that we have, which continued to try to pull in that idea of interdisciplinary and thinking of interiors and architecture as two disciplines. We also try to hire people that are not necessarily siloed in either of those. We've hired artists that are interested in becoming familiar with design and are interested in engaging in the disciplines that we use. And to keep the practice always kind of looking at diversity, right? And a lot of that extends even to the collaborators that we bring into projects, because we love to work with artisans that treat the objects that we use and the surfaces that we design as art, you know, and how are they making materials or making space, making objects that have that level of care and that uniqueness that we can bring into our own work. And as part of this kind of duality, I reached out and started teaching in interiors. So what we then had as our, you know, dynamic between Carl and I as an architect who went to the decorative, that's Carl, and as an architect who was teaching in interiors, me. So we actually are able to kind of find the common ground that we need to have to let the dialogue be rich and sympathetic, I guess, to each other, as much as we like to argue, but it's still with great sympathy. And so as I, you know, took this apart, right, and decided that this is what I should do. I should think of this as, you know, this path as a role model and talk about it. I started, you know, realizing what I had said before, that, you know, that today we are bombarded by information in social media. We're bombarded by references to like other people's lives. There's so much voyeuristic information that is out there that we think that we're always looking for something else that's going to satisfy or help us find our direction. But really, you have to spend a lot of that time looking at yourself and looking at how the decisions that you've made to even get where you are now are part of the decisions that will take you where you want to go. Is the relationship I had with my father as an engineer, the relationship that I had at Cincinnati with the diversity of their disciplines, the people that I met along the way in each of these different steps of a career, all made the person who decided that creating an interdisciplinary studio was the answer. And that's the end. We'll see where we go next.
Francine, thank you so much. That was really delightful and resonated personally for me in so many ways, as I'm sure it did for everybody else who was privileged among us to hear it.
Thank you.
I have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, Astrid Lipka, who I must acknowledge I do not know especially well. Met at an AIA event with my dear friend, Barbara Spandorf, who is also her dear friend and has been a past speaker in this program. Astrid is one of the founding partners of Rice Lipka, a over 20-year-old practice that has done a great deal of award-winning public and civic work, as well as more private work, which she will tell us all about today. She is also an experienced teacher who has taught for many years at Parsons. And as you will hear in her accent, not originally from the United States, but rather European. So we'll leave it at that. And thank you, Astrid. We're happy to have you speak.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And hopefully after this, you we get to know each other a little better.
Well, this is the beginning.
Exactly. So this is great. Thank you also, Francine, for the wonderful presentation that really resonates with what I have been thinking about in going towards this presentation. I realized that it's actually a lot harder than to just talk about your work. it's very personal, and so you'll hear some personal stories. I hope I don't bore you with that, but let's just go ahead. So, but first and foremost, I want to thank Angelique, Annick, and Nancy for this wonderful platform for women in architecture. In preparation of tonight's lecture, or tonight's program, I have listened to some of the presentations that you have hosted over the past years, and it's just touching to listen to those diverse and very personal presentations of varied life stories and career paths. I think it's just an incredible resource to have that, to be able to listen to that, and to also to contemplate what it means to be a woman in architecture. I've personally not really considered too much. I'm just an architect. And so for the first time, I'm really actually questioning, so what does it mean to be a woman in architecture? So as you said, I'm Astrid Lipka. I'm an architect, I'm an educator, and I'm a mom of a wonderful 11-year-old. And together with my husband, Lynn Rice, I lead our architecture studio, Rice Lipka Architects, in downtown Manhattan. We are incredibly lucky to be able to work together as a couple. But it also comes with some challenges, since we share most deadlines. And we also annoy our son very much with our office talk at home, which we're not supposed to do, but somehow it always comes through. At Rice Lipka Architects, we seek to engage the public with works that inspire by bringing a resourceful civic mindedness to a range of projects, from building planning to art and cultural research. Some of the current work is pictured here clockwise. That includes a renovation for the New York Poets Cafe and a ground floor expansion of the Joyce Silsiati Cultural Center, both in the East Village Historical Theater District, and renovation of NYPR's Hamilton Fish Park branch right nearby. Sorry, maybe I have to take a sip. Below is a community center for the Queens Public Library Auburn branch, and a new community center upstate in Philmont, as well as the new headquarters for NYPD's bomb squad at Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx. The title of my short presentation tonight is To Be Determined, Embedded Opportunities. And this came from a recent Pecha Kucha that I gave at Parsons School of Design, where I've been teaching since 2008. I had missed the deadline to submit the presentation title, and so it was published as TBD, To Be Determined. And I was just horrified when I realized this, but then realized the opportunity in this. And so it allowed me to see and to frame our work in a new way. And so it started as a placeholder and really became the title of the presentation, and I embraced it. To be determined in the sense of to be defined in the process of design and through design. So preparing for tonight's seminar, I realized how much this not applies just to our work, but also to our practice in general, and then to my personal path. In a broad sense, to be determined reflects the state of openness and flexibility in life, practice, planning, and design. It stands for an approach of actively teasing out and reshaping the opportunities that are embedded and to be uncovered. At the same time, it's a reminder to question and redefine whether personal or work trajectory or a program brief or a project, and allow for it to adapt, refocus, and evolve over time. So let's look at some of our projects just briefly to see what I mean by this. I will share just a few core moments of where basic building elements take on a larger civic role in the building beyond their primary role and beyond originally defined or determined by program or scope, and that align with our quest for civic connections from the small interpersonal to the larger of community and city scale. So openness and transparency were not at the forefront of the New York Police Department's bomb squad requirements, rather the opposite. The bomb squad was looking for an introverted hub for their compound. The main building program is raised above the floodplain, with the lower level being used as apparatus floor. At a brief moment in time under the 2008 building code, and we always like to find these special moments where we can do something that we can usually not do. 50% of the egress stairs could be open. This allowed us to break open the volume from the inside and centralize the entire program around a glass enclosed, spacious, skylit open stair that connects the upper floor to the apparatus floor. And at the heart of the building, this open stair becomes an internal commons for the bomb squad. A place to see what's going on around and to just casually meet and chat and get together as a community in that bomb squad community. The second egress stair is also open, though on the building exterior. It dips down from a space between the building and the rain screen and provides an active shortcut from the training room directly to the rest of the compound. At the New York Public Library, Woodstock Library, that's in the Bronx, which is a historic Carnegie Library designed by McKimmey and White. Here they're drawing of the original open stair. It was modernized in the 70s with an entrance and 2 enclosed stairs. And again, working under the 2008 code, we opened up the spaces and inserted a new open stair that mainly connects the first and second floor, but also extends to below and above. The stair opening also allows for additional daylight to come into the reading rooms, and the stair allows for visual connection throughout the library. By shifting the first floor core back from the street as much as possible, a long ramp from the street can just reach the first floor. There was really not an inch to spare, allowing strollers and wheelchairs to easily access the first floor without use of a lift. The stairs then starts from a landing about 3/4 in from the ramp. Here the stair starting within the long ramp. I think on the next slide. Yeah, so you can see how the stair has to start in the middle of the ramp to make it up. So we are very much interested in just making these things happen, these open connective spaces. And so that's our passion to just, when we can achieve that, we achieved our goals. At the Sheila Johnson Design Center at the New School here at 5th Avenue and 13th Street, the main 2 levels are negotiated with a wide spatial ramp for all and no additional stair. This is the ramp for all. This is the access from one side of the center to the other. The upper landing, pulled deep into the skylit space, creates an overlook and becomes a stage for a podium for events. There was a small housekeeping closet that we discovered to be in the perfect position, if enlarged, to become a seminar room that overlooks the center. Something not in the program brief, though we knew that the New School was always on the lookout for more instructional space. So here's the room, here's the view of the room, and then the view from the room back into the center and of the ramp in the background. That I see 2 students here from the New School that I think know the space. The exterior window units are rotated and tilted to acknowledge the intersection and have deep frames without mullions that can showcase student work in the depth of the window frame, in the space beyond, or in the building cores where we originally intended for student created graphics to be displayed, like the large scale photograph in the back here. These deep window frames have deep interior seats, gently sloped on the exterior to rest and to lounge from both sides, turning the seats almost into urban furniture. At the QPL Art Library, the building occupies the entire lot, with the major daylight being accessed through the skylights. The one window to the street from the community room is maximized and framed with a seating niche of a low, loungy seating height, inviting people to hang out there. Bringing the inside program as close to the street as possible, a challenge since the ground floor of the center has to be above the floodplain. And in order to project the community happenings out into the neighborhood. So this is the next, yeah, this one. So you can see the building has to be raised. So it's a challenge to bring the public. We want to bring the public and what's happening inside as close as possible to the street. So you can see, you can have this engagement. At the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit, a new window is cut into the formerly solid facade so the situation here is different to at Avon, in that here it's occupiable from the street side, bringing the city into the museum. And it provides an occupiable space for the community to engage with the inside. Positioning a new addition above the existing museum allows the museum to keep as much of its existing identity, which was important for the museum, and expand at the same time. The shift of the rooftop expansion is offset from the footings and creates a defined zone of inside and outside threshold that lets the interior program bleed to the exterior. And together with wood bleachers on the other side of the garden, they frame the new museum forecourt. And in the same way in which we seek opportunities that allow with our core values and beliefs in building or in spaces we design, we seek opportunities for our work. In our practice, we've had opportunities to work on art-related spaces, from museums, galleries, exhibition, to a series of educational spaces, to then a series of libraries, and then theater programs and community spaces. Each new program opportunity is built on some prior work and experience that slightly points towards that new direction. For example, after working on libraries, a renovation of a theater space that was part of a library then led to the design of a theater lobby space. And then that led to 2 projects following up that were of theater and performance venues that we were able to re-envision. So it's in between charting out clear path and trying to follow it, seeing where our interest and opportunities take us. But just to be clear, I'm not arguing for a laissez-faire or passive approach, but rather for a very active approach, steering in a direction. So not believing that you need to completely control the path. There are many paths, and you can think of it like a tree's branches growing towards the light, zigzagging from the stem towards the light, towards their own little patch of light. So with your clear values and interests and convictions, and open to seize opportunities, you can trust that you will move towards the right direction. And so I started looking back at my own life and my own path, and I can see this notion of uncovering trajectories and seizing embedded opportunities throughout my life. I grew up in southern Germany, close to the Black Forest. I spent a lot of time exploring the outdoors, a lot of time making and creating. We kids were always roaming through these rural and woodland landscapes between our camps, aware of the imaginary friendly and non-friendly tribes that were there, and we were creating imaginary with elaborate maps of imaginary landscapes and territories. A bit later, I was fantasizing about my own horse farm and drew up elaborate site plans with trails, pastures, stables, and residences, and designed and rendered the buildings and built elaborate models of those. Models that with those elaborate geometries, I would not even know how to build now. But I was so into it that I had to do it. I had to figure it out. And so when I realized that architects were doing this as their work, I was set on my path. That was great. That actually what I was doing was a profession. I was set. But then still in high school, so just another story, not going to architecture school yet. In high school, in one of my summer jobs, I was working in a bank in a marketing department, just sorting and packaging promotional items. There was a call for somebody in the department to draw green roof details. which was a pretty innovative thought back in 1988. I volunteered myself, even though the call was not really for us summer kids, but more for staff. But I was given the opportunity, and I had my drawings published in a small publication on green building design, which I was very proud of. And clearly not a straightforward plan move, though interesting, that a few years, actually 30 years later, I then designed a green roof for a New York Public Library in New York City. Unfortunately, the green roof was cut from the project. So I still have not had the chance to actually design it. I studied architecture in Stuttgart and Hamburg with 1 semester on Erasmus scholarship in Barcelona in between, and then practiced in Stuttgart, Hamburg, and Zurich. After graduating, I was thrilled to be able to work at Boterichter Terrani, which was then the emerging Hamburg firm to work for. But at the same time, I was following work that was going on in New York and at Columbia University. And I submitted a just in case to not regret not having tried it application for a scholarship from the DAD, which is the German Academic Exchange Service. To my surprise, I received the scholarship and I was accepted at Columbia. And so I just a bit reluctantly, because it was more a just in case application, bit reluctantly moved to New York City, but clearly just for 1 year. After graduating from Columbia's MSAAD program, I started to work for Open Office Arts and Architecture Collaborative, first for the summer, and then just a little bit longer, a few months longer, and a little longer. And one interesting project led to the next interesting project, to the next. And I very much enjoyed working with Lynn there, who had a similar interest in pragmatism and the civic realm. And yeah, it took me then a few years to give into the idea that I was not going to return to Germany and to fully commit to having a practice and a family rooted in New York City. So not planned, but just a path that just happened. In our practice, we have realized that our work, passion, and curiosity for places and project types and programs actually lead the way and present us step by step with more opportunities that we then take on. But it's really just this passion and interest that leads us, and things somehow happen. There's so much career advice available, all the things that you should do: stay curious, network, volunteer, keep learning, seek feedback, stay agile, monitor industry trends. And it all seems a little overwhelming, all the things you should do. I think my advice is to not focus on the far, not focus on the dreams up in the sky, far goals or careers, but rather start with small steps towards what you are really passionate about. See the opportunities that present themselves. Focus less. Focus less on the destination and rather invest in and cherish the journey that gets you there. And with the choice of a career path that is either intentional and very precisely crafted, deliberately making the right decisions that perfectly add up on paper, creating the perfect CV, maybe lacking authenticity. And on the other hand, one that is maybe more idiosyncratic, maybe though clearly shows passion and a common thread and conviction and agency and passion about it. I think the latter one really looks a lot more appealing to me, whether for myself or for anybody that I would want to work with. So I would advise to not think too much about your career or the perfect CV. This is your life, and do what you're passionate about. Think about what you can give, what you can bring to the table, and it will come back to you. Thank you.
You, Astrid. It was wonderful to see your work and to hear so much more about your background and the influence of your upbringing in Germany and how you got here, because I did wonder how you ended up in New York and how you ended up staying. So thank you for sharing that.
It's more an ending up.
Yeah. Well, our next speaker of the evening that I have the pleasure of introducing is Margie Lavender. She is a partner at Kligerman Architecture and Design, a firm specializing in residential and boutique commercial projects that are known for their distinctive design, rooted in tradition, but also modern in their sculptural forms, taut detailing, glass expanses, and often with a touch of whimsy. To their complex projects in New York City and throughout the States, Margie brings an expert eye for detail honed over 24 years as an architect, as well as by her studies and travels in Japan. Her appreciation of craft and architecture and its interplay with nature and light coalesce there and continues to influence her thoughts about beauty and flourishes in her architecture practice at KAD. In 2021, Margie launched an 8-week summer internship in partnership with the NYC institution Prep for Prep, whose mission is to develop future leaders by creating access for young people of color to first-rate educational and professional advancement opportunities. In doing so, Margie has hosted interns, high school interns that are interested in architecture that have gone on to pursue architecture in college and to pursue full-on careers in architecture. Margie is also passionate about gardening and our human relationship to nature. She channels this in her own garden, as well as an acting member of the Garden Club of Irvington's Conservation Committee. Actually, she's a co-chair, not just a member. I'm sure there's so much more that Margie can tell you a lot better than I can. And so with that, I will hand the floor over to Margie to share her story with us all.
Thank you, Angelique, and thank you, Anik and Nancy, for putting this program together. I was excited to learn about it. I guess it was this winter. And I apologize, I'm on a late stage of a cold, so I'm a little raspy, and I might have to mute myself if I get into a coughing fit. And I apologize for the long introduction. Everybody else had very succinct ones. So I'm intrigued and delighted that both Astrid and Francine said that they knew they wanted to be architects when they were little children, because I didn't. And I have a lot of slides, but I will be running through them quickly as we go. So let me just share them. I think this is, everyone see? Okay. So let me just get this thing out of the way here. Okay. Okay, so I didn't always know I wanted to be an architect, and I was making forts and trees and out of pillows and umbrellas and things like that. And hold on, I'm trying to advance my slide and it's not working. As you can see here. And actually, as an aside, as I'm looking through images, I found that my thinking stance has not changed since 1978. And I looked at many site photos and I'm standing like this a lot. So apparently this is like a genetic thinking stance for me. But anyway, as I said, I was always building forts and things like that. And growing up, my sister and I spent all of our time outside. The whole neighborhood was our playground. We built secret clubhouses in our own neighbor, like in around our house and in our neighbors' backyards, to their surprise. And sneaking past their windows while they're watching TV was part of the fun. We'd furnish them with things that we could find, like logs and cinder blocks. But for us, none of this was with professional aspirations. And it was about adventure and carving out small spaces in the large world that we lived in. And really, simply it was playing. And grown-ups weren't telling little girls that they would be architects when I was small, where I grew up. I think Francine was lucky because her father was an engineer. But it's not surprising, really, because when I was 3 years old, when this picture is taken, Title IX was passed, which made gender discrimination in education illegal. And before that, things from architecture to auto mechanics refused to admit women. So my own grandfather quit paying for my mother's college when she got married. She had started her studies at Vanderbilt, and I think would have made a powerful lawyer or CEO, but the goal set by 1960s Southern Decatur, Alabama society was that her goal was to be a wife and mother. So she ended up dropping out of school and marrying my dad. And then later, as their marriage deteriorated, my mother built a successful career in Dallas real estate and took care of us that way. And she later got her business degree as magna cum laude, really for her own edification. She didn't need it for work. But she raised my sisters and I to be ambitious and fiercely independent. And she has been my most devoted fan and sharpest critic. And as our title said, she really left no room for doubt. She had very high expectations for us. And she said, the cream will always rise to the top. And I remember my oldest sister here said, well, what if I'm in a bowl of cream? And she said that she couldn't even comprehend that idea, that we were not going to rise to the top of anything that we did. So that's where I went. And so, as I said, I didn't know I was going to be an architect. This is from my high school sketchbook. So I came to architecture through art, as I've been learning a lot, as my female contemporaries did, unlike Astrid and Francine. That I went to an arts magnet high school in Dallas. I was really into oil painting and printmaking. And I think for me, printmaking was probably the first inkling that setting parameters for my artistic expression tapped into the way that I think, more so than, say, the unbridled freedom of a conceptual artist. So when I was heading off for college, my pragmatic mother recommended I pursue a professional career and do art as a hobby. So I got a book on careers in art. And I remember this is what it looked like. It had this really terrible font. And I remember thinking that the graphic designer should probably read the book and find a new career. But I learned in there also that fine art majors or fine artists can make between $0 and $1 million a year. So I wasn't terribly comfortable with those odds. So I had an interest in design and furniture, and I had always enjoyed exploring antique auctions and old houses. Is something my mother had gotten me into also. So I just picked interior design when I went into school, because I didn't realize that they tell you to check off a major when you sign up for school. And I had only been really focused on art before that. So I remember, though, when I was in interior design classes, that it was a basic drafting class that really sparked my interest in architecture. And at the time, as I think Francine alluded to before, we were all drawing by hand. This is obviously a little before my time, but I picked this picture because there was a lady architect, which was very unusual for the time. But we were drawing on, drafting boards with parallel bars and vellum on Mylar, and I really loved it. I found that the computer was a really rude awakening later when I graduated from school. I did have one computer class in school where they said it was the future, and now it's our life, as we all know. I've learned to accept it as a necessary evil. Anyway, I loved the precision and the creative puzzle solving that architecture presented. And as soon as I could, I transferred to the University of Texas in their architecture program. This is Battle Hall, if anybody knows the school, the architectural library. And I dove in headfirst and found that the balance between logic and art in architecture was really perfect for me. And this is a sketch of my drafting table from that time, and a little bit of my schedule here on the left. And the Eames, I find their inventiveness and creativity really resonates with me. And they said that design depends largely on the sum of all constraints. And that idea has really always worked for me. I love a puzzle to solve, and the limits gives me something to push against, which always ends up being more interesting in the end. And I think this image is fun illustration of this, where the Eames themselves are constrained by the frames of their fiberglass chairs. So when I was in Austin, it just encouraged my love of the outdoors, which was more to offer than when I was in Dallas. And when I wasn't in studio, I was always swimming and climbing the cliffs and riding and hiking. And in school, I developed this interest in the aesthetic relationship between nature and architecture and how one interacts with the other. And Austin is a city that's really great in that the outdoors is really woven into the fabric of the city, unlike some other places. So no one would say that there's an argument to be made that nature is best left alone, but there's something innately appealing about an architectural intervention in nature, be it by humans, like this mirror house by the Scottish artist Eckhart Altberger, and I might be likely pronouncing that incorrectly, or the Villa Malaparte in Italy, or these cast concrete works by Donald Judd that were designed specifically for this site in Marfa, Texas. It's a play on scale. So against the big Texas sky, these almost appear as small objects on the horizon. But as you approach, you realize they're massive structures, 2.5 meters square by 5 meters long and 25 centimeters thick. But we also can be delighted by architectural interventions by nature, like the honeycomb or the nest of a bowerbird. So this interest in nature's interaction with architecture and a desire for adventure and a cultural and architectural experience that was really new to me led me to the Japan studio abroad in my final year in architecture school. We spent the first half of the semester traveling from the south in Hiroshima all the way to the northern island of Hokkaido. And later we went back to the studio and had a design studio on what we learned when we were there. So most of it was about traveling and absorbing art and design and architecture. And it was really transformative to me. And I found that what I brought from there is woven into my life and work really ever since. And this would be the Japanese connection to and reverence for nature, craft, beauty, surprise, and embracing reinvention. This is old Tokyo and this is new Tokyo. So I graduated in December, and after the long intensity of architecture school, I was really itching for a new horizon. And I thought I'd take a short break, which became a long break, because it sounds like there's a theme here, just taking step by step and things lead you to different places. And I wanted to, since I graduated in December, I felt like I had the winter to fulfill a dream I had of living in the mountains, and specifically a ski resort. So I ended up in Vail, Colorado, and I had planned to stay just for the winter, but the summer in Colorado is really glorious. And the days are 70 degrees and the sun stays up till 10 o'clock. And at the time when I was living there, I met the late Rudy Fisher, who was an architect doing high-end residential work. And that's how I landed in high-end residential work. So again, it seems, though I had always had an interest in houses, as I think Francine said, architecture, or house architecture was not really something that we talked about in school. So it was almost happenstance that I landed in high-end residential architecture. And this was really the only work being done in Vail, Colorado, besides maybe condominiums or something like that being built. So Rudy was my first professional mentor. And over the last 24 years, I've had the good fortune of working for 3 relatively small firms where I worked directly with the founders. And each one of them really served as a mentor to me. And I learned and benefited from the trust that they put in me. So from Rudy, at the very beginning of my career, he really trusted me to take on some challenging architectural projects. And he also let me start the interior design department in this office simply because I expressed an interest in it, and this was 2 years out of school. And it taught me a lot about advocating for myself and my interests, and that there are people there who will help you and help you pursue your dream. So after 3 years there, though, if anybody has ever lived in a ski resort, you would know that that is a really long time to live in a ski resort. So I was really ready to be challenged professionally and personally. So my next adventure brought me to New York City. And picture is much later than when I moved there, because I moved there in 2002. So One World Trade Center was built 12 years after I moved to New York City. And it was still really recovering from the collapse of those buildings that I had visited only, the October before, and were still smoldering. So it was an interesting time to move there. But one thing that I found that was only really less than a year later, after 9/11, that New York is such a resilient city, and that wasn't going to stop it. So that's an aside here. So my next 9 years, I worked for Oliver Cope Architect, who's known for classical residential architecture. And he and the senior team there, who remarkably were two women and my future husband, Astrid, I did choose to stop working with him at some point. It was fun at the time, but we had a rule that you couldn't talk about work once you pass Atlantic Avenue, because we lived in Brooklyn. But I think we realized that it was too much, of the same. It's a challenge. So that team taught me to run projects and really obsess over the details in design and construction. And I really learned how to run projects. And I learned the importance of classical proportion and how to follow it. While this was touched on when I was in school, modernism was much more celebrated and really driven into us. So again, in some ways, like this sort of rules of proportion fit into the puzzle solving thing as well. Like, I think sometimes people think there's a lack of creativity because it's, it exists, but there's a lot you can do with these things. But I found myself getting antsy again. So I answered a cold call from a recruiter who introduced me to Tom Kligerman, and the rest is history. So when I joined Kligerman, the company was called Kligerman Barclay, but it's now Kligerman Architecture and Design, and I'm now a partner there. And I joined them because, one, I was intrigued with the prospect of working on their projects locally, but also that they worked all over the US. And so, each new project in a different city or state had its own rich context. And I found that just added like a whole new element of interest to the work that we were doing. I also really liked the people. They were all really, fun and inspiring. And I was excited by the dynamic nature of the design. As we said in my opening description, that there was an inventiveness and sculptural quality to it. There's folded planes and curved planes, and like a reinterpretation of traditional detailing that I found really exciting. And so I made the jump. And I found that working there was really an opportunity to build on what I had been taught before, this deep appreciation for craft and building things with really the highest integrity. And there was a reverence for ordered proportion, but we could push back on it a little bit. And that was part of the fun of it. So over my 13 years at the firm, I continue to be challenged and engaged. And so I really just want to quickly flip through some of our projects to just get you a sense of the work that we do. So this first house is a house in Rhode Island, in Watch Hill, specifically on a peninsula. And one thing that's very interesting about this house, again, it speaks of constraints, because this site had a very limited space that it could be built on. And once we figured out all the setbacks and the FEMA requirements and the height limitations, that we basically carved out what was left. And that really became the shape of this house, which I find it made a very interesting house. So once again, constraints can actually be part of what makes it more interesting. So this is that same house in Watch Hill. Here are some of these folded planes that I was talking about. This is an interior shot of the study. This is another house in Bridgehampton that is a shingle style house, but really with a very modern take on it. And the landscapes by Hollander Design. Again, with the folded planes, an interior shot. You can see this merging of inside and out with these expanses of glass. And this house is in Martha's Vineyard. These are a cypress stair, bedroom that looks out over the ocean. And this house is in South Carolina. So once again, it feels like a traditional home, but there's lots of surprises. I think things that make you question it. The beautifully crafted. The interiors are all wood, highly detailed. This house is in Seattle, in a wooded area, and we used a lot of wooden cast concrete, board form concrete. And you enter through, it looks very solid, and as you come in, you enter into this glassy expanse. It opens itself up to the woods. So my third mentor would be Tom, and from him I learned the value of giving myself over to something that I was really passionate about. I think in the past, I think when I was younger, that I thought of giving myself fully to my work, that there was a loss of self. But I think as I've grown, I've realized that that is actually really, it is a part of me, and it is like, and really giving myself into that passion is a deeper understanding of myself. I think also he's pushed me out of my comfort zone, sometimes as an architect, but also as a leader, and to get more out into the world. I think for a lot of us, you, especially probably younger people on this call, you spend the first part of your architecture career with your head down, just buried in work. And at some point you lift it up and you realize that there is this big, broad world full of really interesting people and interesting things going on. And I think the sooner that you can engage in that, the better and more rich your career will be, which I think you all being here today is a good sign that you're already doing that for yourselves. And so I think also one of the things, there are a few things I had to learn that I think I thought like that when I became a partner, as I took on more leadership roles, I think there were things that I thought like I didn't have the art. What an architect, what's good makes you a good architect doesn't make you a good partner. And I think that in some ways I'm still a work in progress in that sense, because it's only been a year. But there are a few things that I feel like I've had to learn that I'm still learning. And one of them is that to delegate and to give up some control to let other people grow in their careers. The other thing is to be able to move between projects with your design and your, the different dynamics of the different teams. And a big one is understanding that I'm interruptible. I remember bemoaning to a friend of mine that I couldn't get any work done because everybody kept, bothering me and asking me questions. And she said, that is your job. For people to be able to stop you and ask you questions is actually your job. And I thought that is a pretty simple idea, but it was important to hear it. And I've really thought about it ever since in that way. And then the other thing, as I said, to be a bigger, to be a part of the bigger part of the architecture world, attending talks and growing and giving talks just to participate in the greater world. And then I also realized that there are many things, there were overlaps that had prepared me to be a partner, like having attention to detail, making decisions quickly and confidently, project management skills like being cooperative and approachable, holding to schedules. And as we all know, sometimes playing therapist, being able to mediate between contractors and clients works also for mediating between issues in the office. And in the end, just an architect has to be an effective communicator, an organizer of people. And so I think that, that is a skill that carries through forever. And so my last thing is from my childhood self through my restless young adulthood years to now, I have 9 rules for my design and life, and I'm going to share them with you to close up. Connect with nature daily in even a small way, just like opening a window or eating your lunch outside. Embrace levity, because laughter makes everything more tolerable. Appreciate craft of a building, an object, a meal, or even a sentence. Stay curious and ask questions. This makes life more interesting and discoveries enrich your ideas. Sprinkle in surprises, find them and create them. Stop worrying because it's a waste of time. You should adapt or forge solutions instead. Dive in, give as much of yourself as you can to anything you commit to, and don't wait for other people to make things happen. Be bold and unconventional. Allow eclecticism in yourself and in others. And lastly, seek moments of awe in nature, in your work, in your home, garden, and your travels. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Margie.
Bravo.
That was an awesome closeout.
Thank
And
you.
3 terrific presentations, really
Yeah.
standouts among the many we have conducted.
Whoever picked the sequence was brilliant.
Anik. Very, very.
Because it really built upon itself nicely.
Yeah.
Well, you guys came up with the subjects. I just put them in some order, and I'm just like Margie. I love puzzle solving and making order out of what seems to be chaos.
I think that's the architecture trait, right? That's you have to have that.
Yeah.
But we'd love you all to ask your questions to our 3 amazing speakers. Their paths were very different, but there are a lot of parallels in what they have said and shared with you. And I'm sure they have touched upon a lot of things that you've been thinking about. So we want to hear from you, and don't hesitate to ask anyone here a question. We'll be happy to open the floor.
Yeah. Don't be shy. Turn your cameras on, unmute yourself. There's no formal way to do this. Just jump in.
Well, and while we're waiting for someone to jump in, I just want to say that, part of our objective in founding this series is that we want women who are entering the profession to see as many different examples of what it means to be a woman architect or a woman in the profession of architecture, so that everyone will find something that resonates powerfully with her. And additionally, create newness to add to the mix. So with that, if anything that anyone has said has inspired you or provoked you and you want to hear more about it, let's jump in.
Well, we also have some of your questions. Oh, did someone jump in there?
No, I was just thinking while we're waiting, I wanted to add to the discussion of the constraints. I used to quote when I was at Columbia, Toomey was still the dean, and he loved to say, the greater the constraints, the greater the pleasure. And that was always our quote. Because we also at our office, we love the constraints. If we have freedom, too much freedom, we actually don't even know what to do. We had this one project in that we designed for Orders. There was this project Orders 100, where 100 architects designed a villa each, basically without any constraints. And we were completely lost because we love those constraints.
Yeah, that's really the difference, I think, between being a designer and a just an artist,
Yeah, in school, the one studio I took was a sculpture studio, and it was a foundry class. So you were eventually going to cast whatever piece you made in metal, right? And you're handed a lump of wax. That's this soft wax, and it says, make something. I stared at the lump of wax for I don't know how long, just staring there going like, well, tell me, what do you want to be? I was just like, I had no idea where to go. It was crazy because we were so used to giving like, the site is 25 by 100 and it has 3 trees and it has like, give me something within, right?
Well, it's funny. I always hear people speak of architects as introverted, and yet nearly everything we do is in conversation, whether it's with a collaborator or a client or constraints. And those conversations, they began at the beginning and they will go on until the very end. And I don't know, jump in somebody.
Well, I have the first question. Oh, who's speaking? Go ahead.
Lori.
Hi, I have a question. It was a great presentation. Thank you to all 3 of you. And to Nancy and Angelique, and I think Anik for putting these seminars together. But my question is, what I keep hearing about teaching, and I love teaching people how to do stuff, especially when I'm at work. And so I've thought about going into teaching and like starting a business. And I just kind of, would like to know what got you into teaching. Because I heard someone say they never thought about teaching. And I never did either. But the more I'm like, I've got like 11 years of experience, and like, I'm going to get my license within a year, and I'm starting my own business, and I really like to do research in sculptural architecture and things like that. So, and I like to teach people. So I was just kind of wondering what made you want to do that? How did you do it? And what do you love about it?
Astrid, do you want to go first, or you want me to say something?
Yeah. I was at Columbia. After Columbia was asked to be a TA on there in the studio, and just loved it. And then former professor taught at Princeton and also asked me to TA for her, and I love that experience. But then I didn't teach anymore until I had the opportunity to start at Parsons in the thesis program, and I just love teaching. I have continuously since then, every year I teach either a seminar and thesis, or thesis prep, and it's really, two of my former students are here. And it is so rewarding to have the conversations with the students, and especially thesis, where it's not something that you're putting out there, but the students come with their interest, with their passions, and at trying to turn it into a thesis project. And yeah, it's just so rewarding. I do everything to not give it up. There's always too much to do at the office, but this is my holy corner to be able to do that.
It's really rewarding. And the other thing that like escape from the office is another counterpoint to it. But it's odd. I started teaching actually to learn, not to teach, because in a sense I started teaching in the interiors department because our practice was engaging in architecture and interiors, and I wanted to engage that discipline more. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go teach in an interiors program so that I actually start understanding like the mindset that's different, because you come at it from a completely different direction than you do architecture. And it's continued to be this way to, I think you ended your speech with awe. It continues to keep you connected with the awe of what we do, because the students are awesome, really. I mean, it's just amazing, the work that they do, the creativity, the energy, and that you can lose that in a business, right? Your business burdens you by reality sometimes that is not the spirit of what we all came to this place for, right? So, yeah, awe.
Margie, do you want to speak to this too, in your experience teaching and, shaping internships with high school kids?
Sorry, I'm muting myself so I don't cough all over you. I have. So I think Angelique mentioned in my bio that I started a little internship program 2 years ago, and it was, in an attempt to open the doors to architecture and design to kids of color much earlier. Because most of the programs that I was trying to get involved with were focused on college kids. And I was finding that there weren't a lot of kids of color in architecture school in college, and that it was a little too late. Once they're already in college, they've already overcome a lot of hurdles to get there, and made a lot of decisions on their own. So I was just looking for a way that this was what opened me to have internships to high school students in the first place at all. Historically, we didn't do that. And I partnered with this amazing program, Prep for Prep. And they have kids who early on, they find they're generally like in underperforming schools and generally lower incomes, and they apply to get into this program. And then they work like crazy, and they take school really outside of their other school. They get done with class and they go take class for hours. And then when they get thrown with this program, they go to it's called Prep for Prep because it helps them get into some of the best schools in New York City and in the New England area, like in boarding schools and such. So when I reach out to them, they have students who have interest in art or architecture, and they would give me a couple resumes, and I started out, just made up a program and see if it works. And it's been really great. And this, what Francine was talking about, the thing I didn't realize, I thought it was like I was doing a nice thing, an important thing, but I didn't realize how rewarding it was to me and the women who are helping me do it. That it really like got us more excited about the work that we did. And we start with a design problem for the kids so that they have a structure to learn the computer programs and things like that. They generally work on this design project throughout the internships, and it's a paid internship, and they get to go to job sites and do that stuff as well. But there's an educational component to it, and that transformation in us, just getting excited about talking about design in this much more beginning sort of root of what's interesting about it way, has been so rewarding to us, and I think that we didn't realize how much we were going to get from it and learn from it. Anyway, so it's really just building on what Francine was saying.
That's great. I have to say that, there's an element of what you're describing that is the foundation of this program, because, we are all in conversation with each other and enabling those who are coming up behind us to work alongside us. And with each generation, there's new stuff to learn and new things to focus on. And so those of us who are 20 and 30 and dare I say almost 40 years into a career, we have lots of things we need to learn from those who are only just starting out. And it is as much about learning as it is about teaching every step of the way.
Yeah.
And of course, Anik, you know this because you teach, and Angelique, you've had your moments as a guest lecturer in various capacities. So,
Yeah, I think I made the mistake of preparing a whole 2-hour lecture for each class. And I soon very quickly realized that it was A, unsustainable, and B, that it wasn't engaging the students at all. And once that you do engage the students and they say what's on their mind, it becomes such a much richer conversation and more surprising conversation. And to Margie's point, that is where the adventure is, because you don't know what you're going to get. And every class is a surprise. And so in my third year, next year, I'm definitely going to do less talking and more asking and more engaging of the students to draw them out, because they have such interesting things to say and so many thoughts that are outside the box of where we think we need to be in the future.
Well, and I would add that, in the best of circumstances, that very same dynamic of education and teaching and listening is what happens with clients. And, the most satisfying client experiences are the ones where you are bringing your client along to understand things a little bit more from the point of view of a trained professional, because then they can so much more appreciate what it is you are doing together and really participate in making it theirs, and not really just something that you're doing for them in which they have no agency.
Indeed. The only other thing I'll add is in, kind of spending time working in the profession, I think we all have experiences of thinking, wow, I wish I would have known that when I was when I was learning, when I was in school. And so having the ability to take your experience and then bring it back to academia and fill in some of those gaps that we all kind of wish had been filled in sooner, or had someone told us to seek out mentorship sooner, right? Which is something that I think a lot of us, at least a lot of us that are a bit older, weren't really encouraged to do, can, share that with students. So that's the one other thing I'll add about the benefit of teaching, taking our experience and bridging those gaps between academia and practice, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had
First of all,
go ahead, Veronica.
sorry.
Your turn.
Yeah, so I guess as a 16-year-old who's still in high school, I kind of want to add onto you, Anik, and also Margie. I feel like all of these are valid points, and I definitely found myself more engaged in classes that are less lecture but more hands-on and kind of just allowing us to speak our mind. So I think that's great that you guys are doing that. And also, Margie, I feel like it's very amazing that you started this program, because as a student in high school who's trying to pursue architecture, I haven't seen like a paid internship or like an opportunity for high school students. It's mostly just companies accepting like college students for like on their third year or fourth year. But I'm just wondering, how would I know if architecture is for me if I don't get any practice, like until I go to college and I already pay for my degree? Like, what if I don't like it? So I
Yeah.
think it's very amazing.
I think I'll tell you one thing that the thing that really jumped out at me about the kids that I ended up taking as my interns is that they sought out ways to learn architecture on their own, which I was so impressed by. That they had little art portfolios from their schoolwork, but both of them, one of them sought out a scholarship to go to Italy and did this architectural little program there. It was a trip and then a project based on that, and then in a summer. And then another one found online. There were some courses on architecture online, and so when I got there, there were other kids that applied. But when I saw that these girls in high school had really on their own volition got on the internet and looked wherever they could find a way to learn, I was so impressed by that. And so that to me was like a building block to, okay, they're going to really embrace this opportunity. And they really did. So I would recommend, there are all kinds of online, like one of my students was, she was in school in Massachusetts taking an online architecture program in San Francisco, and did, learn some draft. I think she learned SketchUp, and so there is a lot of ways that you can try to get your foot in, because it is, getting internships for high school students is very rare. From my own personal experience before, and everyone I know, because it's a really technical business, and it's usually when high school kids get brought in, they end up organizing the library or doing something that's not really related, and so you either have to find a very special niche, or really there is like a lot online that you can do, and little courses that you can take, continuing education courses and things like that there's a lot of times not age limits to sign up for.
There's
And
also
there
great
are summer
programming.
programs. Sorry.
There's great
Yeah.
programming at the AIA as well. And
Yeah.
I don't know, Veronica, if you're in New York City,
Yeah.
it's worth looking into the New York chapter, because the Center for Architecture has wonderful programming, and maybe not all of it is geared towards high school students, but even some of the things that are not geared towards high school students are very understandable and accessible for someone your age. You should absolutely look into it. And if you'd like to follow up with one of us, I'd be happy to help you connect with someone at the center to see what's available. And all of that programming
That's a
is
great idea.
free. It's super affordable. And then, like has been mentioned, there's all sorts of online programs and summer programs that are in person, and lots of things that we can help you connect with.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah, I
actually,
love
the
that.
AIA has a program for high school. It's a 1 week program I think it's in the spring break, in public school spring break, And we just this spring break hosted two high school students for this very brief internship, and had a great time. They were part of the design team, and we brought them to the construction site and tried to give them as broad an overview as we could within the context of our office. But I also want to say something that is, even if you have the chance to go and see what architecture can be in one office, it's very different from office to office. It's such a broad profession. And I would say that probably we're all doing architecture, but I think we're all doing very different things. The offices are organized very differently, and it's very different animals. So it's within the field of architecture, there is so much difference, but then also architecture is actually, it's interesting because it's a professional field of study that allows you to just, you learn so much about how to organize things, how to bring things together, how to follow constraints. There's so much that you can, if you go through an architectural program, that you can do with even beyond the borders of architecture. There's a lot of the students don't end up in traditional architectural offices. So it can also be really a stepping stone just to get to the next level, and you learn a skill set that can be used in the field of architecture or anywhere outside the field of architecture.
This is
Yeah,
also
thank
a
you.
great time in the city because it's graduation time. And most of the architecture schools, I know Cooper always has a great end of year show. Pratt has its design Pratt Show Week. I don't know what Columbia does exactly to present, but Parsons also has a great end of year show. So
the opening was just last night, and it was fabulous. So I invite all of you to go there and see the work.
Yeah.
Pratt had the Icebox Challenge yesterday too.
Oh wow!
They really?
It did. So In Cho, who's a previous speaker and is a professor in the architecture school, prepared a class that designed and constructed two different ice boxes, one to the New York City current building code and one to the Passive House building code, to demonstrate the efficacy in energy savings with Passive House design. And I mean, depending on whether it's more artistic or more technical, there's all sorts of things to be seen all over the city that anyone can really go and see.
I think it's design week. Isn't it NYC Design Week this week too? Yeah.
Well, Veronica, you're in the right place and you're already doing the right things. I actually met Veronica at an AIA New York Women in Architecture event. She and another student there, she's a Brooklyn Tech student, so I have a bit of background. I invited her here tonight, in part because I knew that Margie was speaking, and I knew that you had participated in Prep for Prep, but you're in the right place. You're already doing the right things, and all of the advice given here is just expanding on what you're already doing. And Margie gave great advice about taking initiative, I should say, and seeking out internships even now. Because as a Brooklyn Tech student, I imagine you guys already have some technical skills. You guys are learning certain programs already. So you're not coming in exactly blind. And you'll have some things that you can present and share, and you can put together some work samples that would be to your advantage in seeking out internships.
And don't forget to seek out scholarships, because I know there's several scholarships through the AIA, for example, that is focused on high school students entering into a NAB accredited program, so getting their BArch. So I would look for those as well.
Yeah, actually, that's a thing that I would like all high school students to know, that NCARB is trying to inform high school about NAB accreditation versus not, because I think as most of us got into architecture school, we had no idea
programs.
whether it was a NAB accredited school or not, but that makes a difference between, you know, getting licensed in a reasonable time frame versus having to do more years of experience because you happen to have a degree in architecture that's not accredited by NAB. So So yeah, informing students in high school is a good place to do that so that they don't end up in a path that takes longer than necessary, since it already takes 13.8 years on average to get licensed in architecture. Someone else was going to ask a question that we cut off. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I would love to connect with all of you guys. So if you could please send me like an email or your LinkedIn in the chat, and I would add you and ask some more questions.
One other thing that my children's high school did that I thought was really great, and I wish they did it every year, that you may want to suggest to your high school, is that they had career night where they invited all the parents of the students to come present what it was like to do their job, just to talk about, and so we had I think we were assembled as a STEM group of parents. So some parents were physical therapists, others were designing software programs, and architects and engineers, and all kinds of professions. And just having the parents talk about what their day at work was like is a huge amount of information, whether you're an outdoors person who likes activity, who wouldn't want to like sitting at a desk all day. That parent went and talked in front of the class to say, I couldn't sit, I needed an active career. And so getting into physical therapy meant that I was actively working with patients all day in a physical capacity. And that's not something that they put in the career books when you're trying to pick a career. So that's also good if there's a way to, and maybe we should even have a seminar session on what a day in architecture looks like. Although you all know who, if you're in an office or in practice.
And the dates are also different.
But I think all of us could also say that, what we thought architecture would be like once we graduate is very different from what we expected. And I think that's where most of the shock comes in, and where most of us get discouraged and say, I don't know if this is for me. Just, I don't like this. I actually like to write about architecture, not do architecture. Or like Nancy, I like people.
I work as a consultant and I don't practice design anymore. But another thing that's really important to point out is that over the past 30 or 40 years, the practice of architecture has changed so dramatically. And I anticipate it will continue to change in dramatic fashion over the next 20 or 30 years. And so, you can't really tell what's going to happen 30 years ahead of time. You have to just find the things that you're interested in and go with them as the changes occur. Because I don't think anybody, when I was getting my education, could have predicted that the internet would come to exist and that we would be able to look at a screen in places all over the world and see each other's faces and communicate and do work like this. And there's all sorts of careers that my classmates went into from architecture school that did not exist as disciplines when we started. And for various reasons, people pursued those disciplines. So, all of this is just to say, things change really quickly these days, and architecture is a great foundation for learning the discipline of thought and the discipline of creativity and invention. But prepare yourself, because it will not stop changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it is really more about thinking what you like, what direction you like, what interests you, and not thinking so much about a fixed profession, because those fixed professions, it used to be those fixed professions, but I think they don't really exist anymore. It's a stepping stone, and that allows you then to go into different directions. And I think architecture is somehow a very broad one, a very broad stepping stone to then go off into a lot of different directions once you kind of redefine and really shape the direction you want to go in.
Well, exactly. I wanted to ask all of you here, Jenna, Jillian, Lori, Ruth, Rebecca, You know, our speakers talked about where their passions began and how they pursued their interests and passions throughout their career, and that led them to meet wonderful people or to open up new doors of opportunity. Let's ask you this question, like all of you, can you tell us about what excites you? As my cousin Carlton would say, what tickles your pickle?
You're crazy, cousin.
I can share. Thanks for the question, Anik. I'm also one of Astrid's past thesis students, so I saw that she was on this panel and I was like, oh gosh, this is so special. I get to rejoin. So I would say that for me, a lot of my creativity comes from my passions outside of architecture. I think serving others in whatever way capacity that I can is one piece of it. Serving others, you just get to meet a lot of people who want to be there and who are in different careers other than architecture and interiors, and to hear their stories. And you will meet a lot of designers as well. So that's one of the many passions and hobbies that I have. And also you can fold that passion to serve or help the community, things like that. You fold it into your architecture. You see what the needs are for others, and maybe that be communities that are underdeveloped or communities that need to be, whose voices need to be amplified. You can use that and, keep going. But yeah.
Some of my passions that got me into architecture, I loved to draw when I was growing up. And when I got to college, I went to JC and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. A lot of people told me you should do architecture because I would draw all the time. So I took a bunch of classes, and one of them was architecture of things I was interested in. And as soon as I took that class, I was like, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do. I love doing this. And what I loved about it was designing and the artistic side of it. And I realized over the years that my designs are sculptural. So I love art. I love to express my art. And I found that through architecture. And at the same time, I love to help people in the community. So I love to listen to people, whoever we're serving, and ask them, help them get what they want, and I really believe, like a lot of us do in architecture, that the environment that you're in really affects people's emotions, their passions in life, and like feeling good about themselves and the environment they're in. So I think beauty inspires people and is good for people's health.
I think my personal interest in architecture has shifted a lot over the years. I was actually fortunate enough to have studied architecture in high school. So I was born in Cuba, but then moved to Miami, and I studied at a school called Design and Architecture Senior High, where it was an art school. And then I later went on to the Rhode Island School of Design for college in architecture. And there we had, so the 5-year program, I had to take structural engineering classes. And soon after those courses, I interned at a Miami curtain wall consultant company, because my interest at the time and what I had previously learned was in structural engineering, and I wanted to dive into more what that practice might look like outside of the studies. And then the following year, I took a lot of courses and studios that were very driven by design competitions. So then I later applied for an internship at a firm called 10 Design, which is very heavy on, they're kind of known for their design awards and submitting very futuristic proposals. So it definitely has shifted over the years, kind of riding that wave that was brought through today's conversation. And then I've graduated last year in 2023. And after RISD, I worked for Yellow House Architects, where I learned this position that I never heard about of the studio director, and became quickly fascinated about wanting to learn more of how the whole studio is put together, how everything's organized. So I would say right now my keen interest is in learning about what the graphic standards are set up in an office, you know, what that might entail, or even the folder organization systems. So it's a little bit of the tedious work, I would say, but it's what I'm kind of focusing at the moment, or have my eye on. And I expect it to change a lot throughout my career, but I definitely are riding that wave. Yeah.
Definitely great to know what you like and know what you want, but also, as all our speakers have said, to be flexible enough to adjust your path as things open up in front of you that you may not have expected, and to try them out, especially as you're younger and can try a lot of different things and see what suits. And sometimes even finding something that's not right for you is as much of a learning opportunity as anything else.
Well, and
Yeah, and
it's also great that you're getting experience, Ruth, with all of those things that occur to running a business in architecture. Because if you ever get to the point where you want to start your own firm, you'll have a good solid foundation from putting all the pieces together that you have to focus on in addition to all this design work.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Ruth, listening to your point about learning the ins and outs of becoming a studio director, it brought to mind just the thought that design isn't everything, including designing your business, like designing how it, you know, how it works, how you want to structure it. That is all a design project of itself. So being open to the fact that design can be in a number of different things, including being a studio director and what that looks like.
I also think like what some people would describe as tedious, if it's not tedious to you, it's not, you know, if you find it interesting. And as, you know, as a partner in a firm, somebody who was interested and really passionate about that would be invaluable to me and anybody who runs a business. So I think you should embrace that if you like it and that your mind likes solving those kinds of problems. I think that's actually really wonderful.
Designing teams, designing processes, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, Francine, I interrupted you.
No. I was just thinking that, you know, life is a creative activity. I mean, it's not, you know, we create our lives, not just, you know, our jobs and our families or our homes. It's the whole interweb of everything, you know? Yeah.
Just to go back, my answer to the question is kind of bizarre, but the house I grew up in had really low ceilings and I could not stand it. And I just became really aware of like my surroundings and the built environment and how it's making me feel. And I didn't get, I wasn't an architecture major until my first year of undergrad. I was undecided, and I basically begged the program director to let me take a course, even though that wasn't allowed. But I think, kind of to echo what Margie said in her presentation, like the balance of how practical but also fun and inventive it can be is like very satisfying, because it's nice when there are correct answers, and sometimes when there are correct answers, it's incredibly frustrating if you're not getting to that answer. But I also just wanted to add, I really appreciated the sentiment you shared, Margie, about being interruptible, because currently at my new position, I am an interrupter, and it can be really hard to navigate especially just in that, like, it's frustrating to feel frustrating. And I think just like the shared onus and the space that that sentiment gives, it really resonates with me.
And one thing I always tell people is, that you should never be afraid to ask those questions, even if you're worried about interrupting somebody, that we really ultimately would rather that you ask the question and would rather help get you to the place that you're needing to get to. I would say this is mostly men, and I know I'm stereotyping, but a lot of young people feel like asking questions, you'll know that they don't know things, and so they don't want to ask you questions. And I really have seen people who do that for years, and they fall really far behind because they're pretending to know things, for many years. They're good at modeling, so you kind of think that they're moving along with everybody else, but they're not asking questions. Or when you try to explain something, they say, no, I know, that's how I was going to do it. And you find that they're stalling, whereas the people who are not afraid to ask the question they move forward, they learn things. And I have been doing this for 24 years, and I still ask questions all the time. I get on the phone and call trades, I call vendors, I call contractors, I ask my people in my office. I'm shocked that I'm still working out foundation details that I've never worked out before. It's that I think asking questions, allow yourself to interrupt, and know that ultimately we know that our job is to be interrupted,
And there's never one answer. Thing
Right.
is, we keep asking questions all the time as we hear different answers, and maybe different answers are the right answer at one time and not at another time. And it's the best way to listen, and listening is completely an important part of all the different engagements that we have, whether it's a client or an employee or a tradesperson. We have to learn how to listen to communicate, and that starts with asking questions. So don't hesitate.
Part of what keeps it interesting. I'm actually looking at, I know we do read what you guys say you're interested in when you register for the sessions. And I noticed, Jillian, one of what you said was nothing specific. I'm interested in the idea of feeling more certain in the uncertainty. And there is so much of that.
Be determined.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all have to say what our thinking stance is. I'm thinking about that picture all this entire time, going like, what is my thinking stance?
Look at photos of yourself. Look at photos of yourself at a job site. It was kind of shocking, because I saw that photo and I thought, that's so funny. That's just like my 3-year-old photo. And then just last week, I was looking at site photos that somebody was standing behind me, in an apartment project, and I'm standing the same way. And I realized you probably do. You should just look at your site photos where somebody kept.
I usually end up standing on the pile of sheetrock, because I'm only 5'1", so it's
to get taller,
trying to get on top of something, So.
As long as it's something stable.
Yeah, that brings me back to my question that I put in the chat, and maybe we'll end there, just to ask all of you, Astrid, Francine, Margie, how much do you think that your environment shaped who you became as an architect? And we've seen you talk a lot about, your personal journey in architecture and how much it was really about you, and you're still the person that you were when you were little, but you also evolved as an architect. And how much do you think your architecture or your being an architect was shaped by your experiences versus who you were when you were born?
I definitely, I have just a small thing to share in that regard. And that is that I grew up in a house that was, it was a row house development. They were white and had offset floors with an quite open floor plan and split level. And they looked like milk jugs. And so it was called in the town, it was the milk jug houses. So I was in one of those milk jug houses. But they were actually amazing because they had this open floor plan. There was always, everything was half level up, and there was no door to a living room, no door to a dining area, no door to the upper play area, what we call the studio. So it was very open. And then going to friends' houses, there was always, everything was compartmentalized. It was either 1 floor or 2 floors, and there were doors to everything. And I realized that I could not take this. I was used to things being as open and fluid as that, and I think that totally influenced me up to now. And seeking the open spaces, we always create these spaces where we create interior spaces and pockets of space between these solid spaces. So more this open flow that I have, I think, internalized from my growing up. And I remember the biggest nightmares. My parents at some point were talking about buying a freestanding house. And we looked at it. It was a traditional house with rooms. And I had for years, still sometimes I have nightmares of that house. So it's a very strong reaction. And I think I was really shaped by the experience of growing up in that house. And somehow, Jillian, it relates to your experience where it's
Low ceilings.
yeah, and you realize you cannot take that, and it has an impact on your entire life.
I don't have anything as remarkable as that. That's pretty fantastic. But Jillian had a similar thing with the low ceilings. I remember I didn't know our ceilings were low. They weren't terribly low, they're probably 8 feet. We lived in a house, like a 1940s, old house. And I went to a friend's house in Dallas, these grand 11-foot ceilings. And I did go home and was like, wait a second, something isn't right here. And I did talk to my mom about what we could do about it. And she thought I was insane.
So to continue the theme on childhood homes, growing up on Long Island, it's the land of Levittown, but also, other suburban development types and the what are they called? The split level. Right, you go up a set of steps to a stoop, you walk in the front door to a stair landing, you look up at the kitchen and you look down at a bathroom. And there's and you're like, okay, which way do I go? You have there's no sense of arrival, no sense of anything. But I'm not sure exactly what that impacted in my becoming why I became an architect, but I do think about that stair all the time, that it gave you nowhere to go. But I think I don't know.
Wow. You all have the same story of becoming architects in spite of your environment. To spite your environment.
Despite it.
In response to.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Astrid, Margie, Francine, for spending with us, and all of you for joining us till the very last minute. We're actually over, but we could go on. It's always too short. I feel like the conversation only just got started, but
really a terrific session tonight. Like spectacular all around. 2.5 hours have just flown by. And keep coming. We'd love to see you again.
Yeah, stay tuned. We'll have summer programming that we'll upload onto our website and share for registration soon. But thank you for another wonderful season.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
See you in the summer.
Hopefully see you in person.
Great program. Thank you.
In fall. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.